Sports Psychology, Film, and the Analysis of Baseball Data, a digital history project by Arlie Beliveau, doctoral student at York University. Sports Psychology became Division 47 of the American Psychological Association in 1986. While historians argue that it's been around in the same general form since the early 1960s, in fact, individuals have been applying psychology to sports since as early as the 1880s. In baseball, there were two early American psychologist teams, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth with the New York Giants, and Coleman Griffith with the Chicago Cubs. The Gilbreths bridged the gap between industrial psychology and scientific management by applying the laboratory methods that Lillian learned from her studies at Brown University to her husband's time and motion efficiency studies of factory work. What made their method unique was that they filmed their experiments. The Gilbreths were tireless self-promoters, and in an effort to demonstrate the applicability of their work, Frank arranged to film the New York Giants baseball team in June of 1913. Gilbreth set up the hand-cranked camera behind the pitcher and placed a grid behind the batter in the hopes of recording accurate measures of time and motion. A couple decades later, professor of psychology at the University of Illinois, Coleman Griffith, was asked by the owner of the Chicago Cubs, Mr. Philip K. Wrigley, to apply his refined method of sports psychology to his baseball club. Griffith took the contract and produced detailed reports and films of the team over the next 2 years. Although this footage has been lost, here are some newsreels of the club practicing in the preseason, where Griffith called them out for lazy, undirected play. He believed that drills should train players in skills that would translate directly to game situations, and that just lobbing a few balls around was a waste of time. My project looks at these first two instances of filmed sports psychology to see if the interventions had any significant effect on player outcomes. I wanted to find out if further study was warranted, since they're not typically considered to be part of modern sports psychology. My hypothesis was that Griffith's gains with the Cubs would be higher than the Gilbreths with the Giants, and that theirs would be higher than a control team. I obtained the data for this study through the Sean Lawman Baseball Database, available in the R Library. It covers all team and player statistics for each American Major League Baseball team going back as far as 1871. I selected the data for the years prior to, during, and after the interventions made on both teams. I also chose a control team, the Boston Red Sox, based on their similar standing in the pre-intervention year, and because they had the smallest difference in player statistics for both teams. Because both psychologists reported on pitching, I decided to look at pitcher strikeouts as my first variable. Before starting the primary analysis, I checked to make sure I met the necessary assumptions of the mixed models and repeated measures MANOVA. I first tested the shape of each variable to ensure normal distribution. Any variables that were not normally distributed were transformed accordingly. I also generated box plots to visualize the medians and shapes of the variables. Here we can see they're positively skewed, and with a square root transformation they become more normalized. Then I made bar graphs to show the before and after transformations. Finally, I tested the homogeneity of the variance-covariance matrix for compound symmetry. Moving forward, I performed a repeated measures MANOVA on 13 complete observations, comparing the 3 teams over the 3 times. This analysis revealed that there was no significant difference in player scores between the 3 teams, over the 3 times, before, during, and after treatment, and that there was no interaction effect, meaning that the 3 teams behaved similarly over time. Here are a few HE plots to visualize this data. In a significant effect, the green variable vector would exceed the red error ellipse, and it is possible to visualize the analysis in 3 dimensions. I decided to run a mixed design MANOVA because baseball players were often traded and I wanted to keep all of their data. The repeated measures MANOVA dropped out incomplete data from the analysis, leaving only 13 observations, while the mixed model allowed for 67 complete and incomplete observations. Furthermore, the pre, post, and follow-up structure of the mixed MANOVA accounted for the intercorrelations between these 3 time periods. Removing the partial correlations makes the analysis more powerful and increased my chances of detecting minute differences. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, the mixed model did not yield significant results. Spaghetti plots of the three teams show player trends over each time period, and unfortunately there are no discernible trends for these pitching statistics. I repeated the process to test for improvements in batter statistics for the three teams. Given that there were more batters than pitchers, I hoped that the increased data might help show a significant effect. This data was also skewed, and I transformed it using a square root function. Compound symmetry was great, but unfortunately the repeated measures MANOVA on 149 batter observations was not significant. The teams performed the same, the time periods were not significantly different, and there was no interaction between the three teams over time. The mixed models analysis of batting statistics included 267 observations, but it unfortunately was also not significant. The spaghetti plots showing each batter's performance for the three teams over the three times does not show any particular trend. So I thought I'd visualize both variables over time and try and explain why I didn't find any significant effects. Using R and Google Viz, I plotted each team's strikeouts and hits on a dynamic bubble chart for the years between 1901 and 1950. I then highlighted the years involved in the analysis. Here we can see the same plot now for hits instead of strikeouts. The bubbles moving across the screen represent how many hits each team got in each given year. And again, here are the highlighted years that we were interested in. What the dynamic bubble charts allow us to see is that both teams were actually on downward trends during the years that we're interested in. And so it's not surprising then that I wouldn't have found player statistics to have improved. In conclusion, to answer my question, early psychological intervention of Frank and Lillian Gilbreth and Coleman Griffith on baseball teams did not seem to have a significant effect on player statistics, including pitching and strikeouts. This digital history analysis has convinced me not to pursue a research project, arguing that the Gilbreths or Griffith be included as the early originators of sports psychology in America. Thanks for watching, and here's some footage of the Cubs being taken out of the World Series in 4 straight losses to the New York Yankees in 1938. Footage for this project came from the Critical Past website and from the Prelinger Internet Archive.